3 a.m., the witching hour. That's when things went from creepy to downright terrifying. I was huddled in a corner, my camera the only light in the pitch-black room, when suddenly... But let's back up. I need to tell you how I ended up in this nightmare, and why I'll never be the same again. I never believed in ghosts, not until that night. Looking back, I can't believe I let myself get roped into this mess. It all started with a stupid dare from my buddy Mike. He knows I run a YouTube channel debunking paranormal claims, and he thought it'd be hilarious to see me spend a night in America's most notorious haunted house. At first I laughed it off, but then the comments started rolling in. My viewers were practically begging me to do it. "Prove you're not scared," they said. "Show us you really don't believe." Before I knew it, I was agreeing to the whole thing. Big mistake. The place had quite a reputation. They call it the Blackwood Manor, this creepy old Victorian mansion just outside of town. Local legend says it's seen more deaths than the county morgue. Murders, suicides, freak accidents, you name it. It's happened there. People claim to hear screams in the night, see shadows moving on their own. The usual ghost story nonsense. But the challenge came with some pretty strict rules. No phones allowed inside. Had to stay the whole night, from sunset to sunrise. And the kicker? I had to live stream the entire thing. Great for views, not so great for my nerves. I showed up at the house feeling cocky. I had my camera gear, some snacks, and a whole lot of attitude. I was gonna debunk every creepy sound, every ghostly occurrence. I had explanations ready for everything. Old pipes, settling foundations, wind through cracks in the walls. This was gonna be a cakewalk. As I walked up to the front door, I couldn't help but feel a little impressed. The place was massive, all dark wood and intricate carvings. Gargoyles leered down from the roof, their stone eyes seeming to follow me. I shook off the feeling. Just my imagination working overtime. I reached for the doorknob, and that's when I felt it. This sudden chill that ran right through me like I'd stepped into a freezer. For a second, just a split second, I hesitated. What if? But no, I pushed the thought away. There's no such thing as ghosts, remember? Taking a deep breath, I turned the handle and stepped inside. The air felt different. Heavy somehow, like the house itself was holding its breath. I told myself it was just musty from being closed up so long. And then it happened. Before I could even turn around, the heavy oak door slammed shut behind me with a bang that echoed through the empty halls. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Just the wind, I told myself. Just the wind. But standing there in the gloom, my camera the only source of light, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd made a terrible mistake. What could possibly go wrong, right? As it turns out, everything. Everything could go wrong. I didn't know it then, but that slamming door was like a starting gun. The house was awake now, and it knew I was here. You ever been somewhere so quiet you could hear your own heartbeat? That's nothing compared to this. In Blackwood Manor, the silence itself seemed to whisper. And let me tell you what it was saying. That's the kind of stuff that makes even a skeptic like me start to sweat. I started setting up my camera equipment in the living room, trying to keep my hands steady. The floorboards creaked under my feet, and I swear each step echoed like a gunshot in that dead silence. I panned the camera around, capturing the dusty old furniture and faded wallpaper. Nothing too spooky yet, right? Wrong. As I moved deeper into the house, things started feeling off. The walls were ice cold to the touch, even though it was a warm night outside. I told myself it was just good insulation, but man, it felt like sticking my hand in a freezer. And the shadows? They seemed to shift and dance just outside my field of vision. Every time I turned to look, they'd settle back into place, innocent as can be. I kept thinking, what the hell made me agree to this? I mean, yeah, the views would be great for my channel, but standing there in that creepy old house, I was starting to think maybe I'd bitten off more than I could chew. But I'm no quitter. I pushed on, muttering explanations under my breath like some kind of weird mantra. It's just old pipes settling, I'd say when I heard a weird groan from the walls. Just a draft when I felt a cold spot pass by. Trick of the light every time I thought I saw something move. About an hour in, that's when I heard it. A whisper so faint I almost missed it. I froze, straining my ears. It was like someone was talking from very far away, or underwater maybe. I couldn't make out the words, but I swear it sounded like my name. I spun around, heart pounding. "Hello?" I called out, feeling like an idiot. No answer, of course. Just that heavy, watchful silence. Let me tell you, that first hour in Blackwood Manor, it shook me. I went in cocky, sure I'd debunk everything. But standing there in the dark, camera in hand, I wasn't so certain anymore. How do you explain away a feeling? That constant prickle on the back of your neck, like someone's watching you. I was just about to call it quits on the ground floor when I heard it. A loud, drawn-out creak from upstairs, like someone stepping on an old floorboard. My heart nearly stopped. I was supposed to be alone in this house, right? I stood there for a good minute, debating what to do. The smart thing would have been to get the hell out of Dodge. But curiosity, or maybe stupidity, got the better of me. I took a deep breath, pointed my camera towards the stairs, and started climbing. Time to see what the second floor had in store for me. Looking back, I wish I'd just walked out that front door and never looked back. But hindsight's 20/20, and I was about to learn just how blind I'd been. Ever had that feeling where the hairs on the back of your neck stand up for no reason? Yeah, well, multiply that by 100. As I stood at the top of those creaky stairs, I realized something. Sometimes, the scariest things aren't what you can see, but what you can't. And in Blackwood Manor, the unseen was about to make itself known in ways I never could have imagined. I took a deep breath and started exploring the upstairs bedrooms. Each step felt like I was walking deeper into a nightmare. The floorboards groaned under my feet, and I swear the temperature dropped with every room I entered. My camera was shaking in my hands, and I couldn't tell if it was from the cold or my nerves. That's when I saw it. A dark figure at the end of the hallway, just standing there, watching me. My heart started racing so fast I thought it might burst out of my chest. "Hello?" I called out, my voice breaking. No answer. I took a step forward, and the figure vanished. Just like that. I ran to the spot where it had been, but there was nothing. No doors, no hiding spots. Nothing but an empty hallway and my own ragged breathing. I tried to tell myself it was just a trick of the light, maybe a shadow from outside. But deep down, I knew better. The whispers started up again, louder this time, almost like they were right next to my ear. I couldn't make out the words, but they sounded urgent, insistent. I spun around trying to find the source, but it seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. As night fell, things got even weirder. Objects started moving on their own. I'd set my camera down for a second, and when I turned back, it'd be in a completely different spot. Doors would slam shut behind me, even though there wasn't a breeze. And the shadows, they seemed to have a life of their own, stretching and twisting in ways that defied logic. I kept trying to rationalize it all. Maybe the house was settling. Maybe there were hidden speakers playing tricks on me. Hell, maybe I was just losing my mind, but with each passing hour, those explanations felt weaker and weaker. Dr. Alison Bruneman, this psychologist I'd interviewed for my channel once, always said that fear and expectation can play tricks on your mind, make you see things that aren't there. But this felt different, more real than anything I'd ever experienced. I remembered reading about a study where people who expected to see ghosts were more likely to report weird stuff happening. But I'd gone into this whole thing as a skeptic. I wasn't looking for ghosts. If anything, I was trying my damnedest not to see them. By midnight, I was a mess. Jumping at every creak and shadow, my camera clutched to my chest like a lifeline. I'd come here to debunk the paranormal, but now I wasn't so sure about anything anymore. That's when I heard it. A sound that made my blood run cold. A child's laughter echoing up from downstairs. High and sweet and totally impossible. Because I was alone in this house, wasn't I? You ever wonder why they call it the witching hour? I always thought it was just some spooky story. But as the hands of my watch crept towards 3 a.m., I started to understand. The air got thick, like trying to breathe underwater. And then, well, let's just say I learned why some hours are best left unmentioned. I glanced at my watch, 2:30 a.m., 30 minutes till the witching hour. The temperature had dropped so much I could see my breath. I kept telling myself it was just the old house's crappy insulation, but deep down, I knew better. Things were getting weird, like really weird. The whispers I'd been hearing all night, they were getting louder, more insistent. It was like someone was right next to me, muttering in my ear. I spun around, trying to catch whoever was messing with me, but there was no one there. Just empty rooms and long shadows. Then I saw it. Clear as day, right in front of me. A shadow figure, tall and dark, standing in the doorway. It wasn't like the vague shapes I'd been seeing all night. This was solid, unmistakable. Human-shaped, but wrong somehow. I froze, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I lifted my camera with shaking hands, desperate to catch this on film. Maybe if I had proof, I could convince myself I wasn't going crazy. The figure stood there, motionless, as I fumbled with the settings. Just as I hit record, it moved. Not walked, not glided, but rippled, like a stone dropped in a pond. And then it was gone. I played back the footage, my hands trembling so bad I could barely hold the camera. There it was, a dark shape in the doorway. But as I watched, the image distorted, going fuzzy and then cutting out completely. I swore under my breath. So much for evidence. The whispers were changing now. Before, they'd been indistinct, like background noise. But now I could make out words. My name, over and over again. Jake, Jake, Jake. It was like they were calling to me, trying to get my attention. I wanted to run, to get the hell out of there, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. That's when I heard it. The most blood-curdling sound I've ever heard in my life. It started as a low moan, rising to a shriek that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It was filled with pain, with rage, with something inhuman. I clapped my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The sound was inside my head, rattling around my skull. Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, the doors started slamming. First one upstairs, the bang echoing through the house. Then another. And another. It was like the house itself was alive, angry at my intrusion. I stood there, paralyzed with fear, as the slamming got closer and closer. I'd come here to debunk ghost stories, to prove there was nothing to be afraid of. But standing there in the dark, with unseen forces closing in around me, I realized how wrong I'd been. The witching hour was almost here, and I had a feeling the real terror was just beginning. You know that feeling when your fight or flight response kicks in, but there's nowhere to run. As I stood there, heart pounding, I realized with growing horror that this house had become my prison. The real question was, for how long? I couldn't take it anymore. The whispers, the shadows, the bone-chilling cold, it was all too much. I needed to get out. Now. I grabbed my camera and made a mad dash for the front door, my footsteps echoing through the empty halls. But when I reached for the handle, it wouldn't budge. I threw my whole weight against the door, but it was like trying to move a mountain. Panic rising in my throat, I sprinted to the nearest window. My fingers scrabbled at the latch, but it was frozen shut. I tried another and another. Nothing. Every single exit was locked tight, like the house itself was determined to keep me inside. That's when the doors started slamming again. Bang, bang, bang. Each one louder than the last, getting closer and closer. I spun around, trying to track the sound, but it seemed to come from everywhere at once. My heart was racing so fast I thought it might burst out of my chest. I'd always prided myself on being level-headed, you know? The guy who could explain away any bump in the night. But this was breaking me. With each slam, I felt my grip on reality slipping a little more. Was this what it felt like to lose your mind? The temperature plummeted. I'm talking Arctic levels of cold here. My breath came out in thick clouds, hanging in the air like some kind of ghostly fog. I wrapped my arms around myself, shivering so hard my teeth chattered. But it wasn't just the cold making me shake. It was the realization that I was well and truly trapped. I stumbled through the house, checking every door, every window. Nothing budged. It was like the whole place had been sealed up tight, with me inside. I kept muttering to myself, trying to hold on to some shred of rationality. There's got to be a way out. There's always a way out. But deep down, I was starting to doubt that. The whispers were back, louder than ever. They seemed to come from the walls themselves, a constant stream of unintelligible words that set my nerves on edge. I clapped my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The sound was inside my head, impossible to block out. I don't know how long I wandered through that house, searching for an escape that didn't exist. Time seemed to stretch and warp, minutes feeling like hours. My camera dangled forgotten from my wrist, the lens fogged up from the cold. Finally, exhausted and terrified, I collapsed in a corner of the living room. I pulled my knees up to my chest, trying to make myself as small as possible. Maybe if I was quiet enough, still enough, whatever was in this house would forget I was here. I glanced at my watch, the glowing numbers the only light in the pitch-black room. 2:59 a.m. 1 minute until the witching hour. 1 minute until what? I didn't know, but every instinct I had was screaming that something big was coming. As I huddled there in the dark, I couldn't help but think about all those times I'd scoffed at ghost stories. All those haunted places I'd visited, confidently explaining away every creak and shadow. I'd give anything to go back to that blissful ignorance now. The second hand on my watch ticked closer to midnight. 10 seconds, 5 seconds, I held my breath, eyes locked on the numbers. 3, 2, 1. 3 a.m. The witching hour had begun, and I had a feeling the real terror was just getting started. They say the veil between worlds is thinnest at 3 a.m. But what happens when that veil doesn't just thin, but rips wide open? As the grandfather clock chimed 3 times, I realized I was about to find out, and nothing could have prepared me for what came next. The moment that third chime faded, all hell broke loose. I'm not talking about a few creaky floorboards or a door slamming. This was full-on horror movie-level chaos. Objects started flying across the room like they'd been shot out of a cannon. My camera bag zipped past my head, missing me by inches. Books flew off shelves, pages fluttering like demented birds. And the noise. God, the noise. It started as a low moan that quickly built into a cacophony of screams. Not just one voice, but dozens, maybe hundreds. Men, women, children, all shrieking in terror and pain. It was like every soul that had ever suffered in this house was crying out at once. I scrambled backward, trying to get away from, well, everything. My back hit the wall and I slid down, curling into a ball. This couldn't be happening. It wasn't possible. But there was no denying what was right in front of my eyes. That's when I saw them. Apparitions, ghosts, whatever you want to call them, misty figures forming in the air, their faces twisted in agony. They swirled around the room, passing through furniture like it wasn't even there. One floated right through me, and I swear I felt my soul freeze. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. All I could do was watch in horror as the impossible played out before me. My mind kept trying to rationalize what I was seeing, but there was no explanation. No trick of the light or hidden projectors could account for this. The entities seemed to be closing in on me. With each passing second, they got clearer, more solid. I could make out details now: Victorian-era clothing, wounds that looked fatal, eyes that glowed with an otherworldly light, and they were all looking at me. That's when I remembered my live stream. In a panic, I fumbled for my camera. If I was going to die here, at least there'd be proof of what happened. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hit the button, but somehow I managed to start broadcasting. If anyone can see this, I gasped into the camera, I need help. This is real. It's all real. The ghosts, the haunting, everything. Please, someone, anyone. A blood-curdling scream cut me off. One of the apparitions was right in front of me now, its face inches from mine. Its mouth was open impossibly wide, and I could see straight down its spectral throat. I scrambled to my feet, still clutching the camera. The room was a whirlwind of flying objects and screaming spirits. I dodged a lamp, nearly tripped over a chair that slid into my path. All the while, I kept the camera rolling, trying to capture every impossible moment. But something was wrong. The image on my screen was glitching, cutting in and out. Static crackled across the display. No, not now. I needed this evidence. Needed people to see what was happening. Come on, I muttered, fiddling with the settings. But it was no use. The feed was failing, cutting out more and more frequently. The last thing I managed to broadcast was a sea of ghostly faces surging towards me, their mouths open in silent screams. Then the screen went black. The camera died in my hands, leaving me alone in the dark. Alone with them. You'd think losing contact with the outside world would be the worst part. Trust me, it wasn't. What happened next made me wish for the comfort of that dead camera. I stared at the black screen in disbelief. No, this couldn't be happening. Not now. I frantically pressed buttons, trying to coax some life back into the device. Nothing. The battery had drained completely, way faster than it should have. Come on, you piece of junk, I muttered, fumbling in my bag for the spare battery. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get it in. The camera flickered to life, and for a second, I felt a rush of relief. But it didn't last. The screen was full of static, the image cutting in and out. I could barely make out the room around me, let alone the ghostly figures I knew were there. I tried adjusting the settings, but nothing helped. It was like something was interfering with the signal. I remembered reading about electromagnetic fields in haunted locations, how they could mess with electronics. I'd always thought it was bull, but now I wasn't so sure. Desperate, I tried to reconnect to the livestream. Error message after error message popped up. No signal, no connection, no hope of reaching the outside world. I was truly alone now. The temperature dropped even further. My breath came out in thick plumes hanging in the air like smoke. And through the fog I saw them. The entities. They were gathering around me, drawn to the failing equipment like moths to a flame. I backed away, clutching the camera like a shield. Stay back, I said, my voice cracking. As if ghosts would listen to me. They pressed closer, their forms becoming more solid with each passing second. The camera started to spark, literally spark. Blue flashes of electricity danced across its surface. I yelped, nearly dropping it, but I couldn't let go. It was my only link to the real world, my only proof that this wasn't all in my head. Through the static on the screen, I caught glimpses of what was happening. Faces, twisted in agony or rage, flashing in and out of view. hands reaching for me, passing through my body and leaving trails of ice in their wake. I tried to run, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. The spirits were all around me now, a swirling vortex of spectral energy. The air crackled with an otherworldly electricity that made my hair stand on end. The camera gave one final, violent spark. On the screen, I saw a sea of ghostly faces surging towards me, their mouths open in silent screams. Then, with a pop and a whiff of ozone, it died completely. I was plunged into darkness, the oppressive kind that seems to press in on you from all sides. The kind of darkness where you can't tell if your eyes are open or closed, and in that darkness I felt them. Unseen forces closing in from every direction. A cold hand brushed my cheek. Another gripped my arm. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. The darkness seemed to swallow everything, even my voice. I was alone in the dark, with them, and I had a feeling the real nightmare was just beginning. They say the darkest hour is just before dawn. Well, whoever said that clearly never spent a night in a haunted house. As the spirits closed in around me, I was certain I wouldn't live to see the sunrise. But then something happened that I still can't explain to this day. It was like someone flipped a switch. 1 second, the room was chaos, ghosts everywhere, objects flying, that bone-chilling screaming. The next, nothing, dead silence, the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. I stayed curled up in that corner for what felt like hours, waiting for the other shoe to drop. This had to be a trick, right? The calm before an even worse storm. But as the minutes ticked by and nothing happened, I started to wonder. Slowly, so slowly, I uncurled myself. My joints ached like I'd aged 50 years overnight. I blinked, trying to adjust to the dim light. That's when I noticed it, a faint glow coming through the grimy windows. Sunrise. I'd made it through the night. The relief hit me like a tidal wave. I wanted to laugh, to cry, to shout, but all I could manage was a shaky exhale. I was alive. Somehow, against all odds, I'd survived. As the sunlight grew stronger, I forced myself to my feet. Time to see what this place looked like in the light of day. I shuffled through the rooms, taking it all in. The house was a wreck. Furniture overturned, books and knick-knacks scattered everywhere. Evidence of the night's chaos. But there was something else, too. In the daylight, Blackwood Manor just looked sad, old and abandoned and forgotten. It was hard to reconcile this dusty old place with the terrifying force it had been just hours ago. I made my way to the front door, half expecting it to be locked again. But the knob turned easily under my hand. Just like that, I was free. Standing on the front porch, blinking in the bright morning sun, I tried to process everything that had happened. I'd gone into that house a skeptic, sure I could explain away anything I saw. Now I didn't know what to believe. I thought about all those times I'd scoffed at ghost stories, all those haunted places I'd confidently debunked. How arrogant I'd been. How blind. There were things in this world that couldn't be explained away with logic and reason. I'd learned that the hard way. As I walked away from Blackwood Manor, I felt different, changed, like I'd aged years in a single night. The weight of what I'd experienced sat heavy on my shoulders. I'd survived, yeah, but at what cost? I glanced back at the house one last time. In the morning light, it looked almost peaceful, but I knew better now. I knew what lurked behind those walls when night fell. I'd gone in a skeptic and come out a believer, and let me tell you, that's not always a good thing. Some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed again. Some knowledge changes you forever. So, if you're ever tempted to spend a night in a haunted house, take it from me, don't. There are some things in this world that can't be explained away. And trust me, you're better off not knowing what they are. I went in a skeptic, but I came out different. Changed. The things I saw in that house, the stuff I experienced, it shook me to my core. I can't explain it all away anymore, you know. There's more out there than we understand. I keep replaying that night in my head. The whispers, the shadows, the bone-chilling cold. It's like it's burned into my brain. I used to laugh at ghost stories. Now I get chills just thinking about them. To anyone out there thinking about trying something like this, just don't. Some things can't be explained, and trust me, you're better off not knowing. There are doors in this world that, once opened, can never be fully closed again. I opened one of those doors, and now I've got to live with what came through.
Hey, hope you survived the night with me. Subscribe and click the bell icon to never miss another terrifying tale. Your support keeps the stories coming.